Hey YouTube, welcome back. MDEX Music here, and today we'd like to talk to you about one of the newest features we've included in Mapping Tonal Harmony Pro 7, and that is automatic reharmonization. So if you remember from some of our earlier series, we talked about reharmonization. We did it with Oh Danny Boy, and maybe you discovered how complex a topic it can be, from substitutions to interpolation to line cliches. Well, we've included a one-touch solution to all that in Mapping Tonal Harmony 7, where it does all of that automatically for you. So let's say you have a chord progression and you want to kind of jazz it up a little bit or see what can happen with regard to some of the techniques we mentioned earlier. Well, that's what we've done here. We've created a chord progression with some open spaces in it, and it's going to allow us to do a lot of the things that we talked about earlier. Or rather, it's going to let Mapping Tonal Harmony Pro do all that work. So first, let's take a listen to what we have currently. Just a pretty standard, straightforward set of chords. Check it out. All right, so there's our original chord progression. Let's go into the Reharmonizer and see what we can do with it. That button is right up here. Click on that, and you see all the options we have with some of the techniques we've gone over, like interpolation, anticipation, modal interchange, and all that stuff. So I'm just gonna go in and randomly select some of these options based on either doing it a few, sometimes, many times, or all the time that's possible. So let's do a few two minor 7 interpolations. Let's do some of these. Let's do some dominant variations. Let's do a few bassline cliches. Let's do, I like these. I like secondary 5/7 anticipations. Let's say I want to do some of those, a few of those, and some sub 5/7s. Melodic line cliches. Yeah, let's do a lot of those. All right, so we click the Reharmonization button here, and we're left with this. Let's check it out. So there you have it. Pretty cool, right? What Mapping Tonal Harmony Pro has done is, using a random number generator with the parameters we put in, has come up with something completely cool and unique and different than what it was before, right? So let's go through, I guess, each point, each technique, and talk about how they work and what it does when you move the leveler left or right with regard to that technique. So we can always go back to the original version by clicking right here, back to original. There we go. There's our original chord progression as it was. So we're gonna reset all of these technique parameters. Also, once again, we've extensively gone into any one of these techniques in our previous video on reharmonization. So if you're not super clear on what a bassline cliche is or what a sub 5/7 substitution is, there's a video explaining any one of these techniques. Definitely check it out. So we'll start with the 2 minor 7 interpolation right here. So if I click on all, what it's going to do is 100% of the time, it's going to insert a 2 minor 7 anywhere it could possibly go. So if I look at the chart as it is right now, I can see right here in measure 4, there's a 5 chord. It's going to put a 2 chord right before that. If I look over here, fast forward a couple measures, there's the 5 of 4 right there, it's going to insert a 2 minor 7 chord there. So if I click on all, reharmonize, so boom, there we have it. The 2 chord gets thrown in right there. Over next to it, like we talked about, the 2 of 4, and anywhere that technique is possible, Mapping Tonal Harmony Pro has used it. So if I only want a few 2 minor 7 interpolations, I can tell Mapping Tonal Harmony Pro to do that also. First thing I got to do is go back to the original and then just reset the parameter over to few. And so there we go right there, threw in one right before our A7 flat 9, which then led to the D minor 7 on the next measure. Go back to reharmonization. So basically how this works is few is 25% of the time, some is 50, many is 75, and all it will do it 100% of the time wherever that technique is applicable. So let's move on to secondary 5/7 anticipations. So what the secondary 5/7 anticipation feature will do is merely insert a secondary 5/7 chord in front of any primary chord in the progression. Let me show you what I mean. If I just click on all, reharmonize, boom. So this G7 chord that we had here in measure 5 was now set up by its 5 chord, all right? You're not gonna see one here because that is the 5 of the chord it's going to. So it's not gonna repeat any 5/1 movement that's already in the progression, and it won't apply it to secondary functions either. So we're just talking about inserting them on primary chords and not doubling any 5/1 movement that's already in the arrangement. Mapping Tonal Harmony Pro will also randomize whether the insertion of this chord is 1 beat before its target or 2. Because remember, this is merely just a use of tension and release. So sometimes it's good for that tension to resolve right away, or maybe you might want to do it a bit more extended before it resolves. That's going to be completely randomized too for you. So that's another cool feature we've included in Mapping Tonal Harmony Pro. So our next feature, the 7 diminished 7 anticipation, is essentially the same exact thing, only instead of using the 5/7 chord, we use the 7 diminished. Because these two chords have so much in common, it's easily substitutable. You can use one or the other, and they both basically achieve the same purpose. It's just, once again, like we said, tension and release. So let's slide this all the way up. First, we'll go back to the original, right? Let's see all the places that can, and you'll notice it's exactly the same places we had the secondary 5/7 anticipations occurring in. And then once again, randomly, sometimes 2 beats preceding the target chord, or sometimes 1 beat preceding the target chord. Next, we're going to move on to sub 5/7 substitutions. Let's go back to the original progression again, zero that out, and max this out. So what this is merely going to do is replace any of the 5 chords in your arrangement, be it a primary or secondary 5 chord, with its sub 5. So right off the bat, I can tell you right here, this G7 is going to turn into a D flat 7. And the reason that works, like we've talked about before, is because those 2 chords, this G7 here, and its sub 5, share the same exact tritone, which has that tension release effect that we talked about before. So let's click on the reharmonization button and watch magically as D flat 7 shows up there. Boom. And everywhere else that technique was applicable, Mapping Tonal Harmony Pro applied it. You're also going to notice some of the information about the chord progression has changed, like the mode is now Lydian flat 7, the solid authentic cadence indicator is now turned into a dotted, because now it's by way of a half step, but you still have the same 5/7/1 sort of tension release effect, but it's just slightly different now. So now the arrow looks different, the chord scales are all different. There's another one over here. All right. So anywhere that was possible, Mapping Tonal Harmony Pro inserted it. All right. So next up is Modal Interchange. All this really does is borrow from another mode in order to incorporate more color or tension to the chord. It's going to do that pretty much exclusively on dominant chords and some minor chords. So anywhere you have a 5/7 chord of any function, you're going to see that chord substituted out for another chord of another mode. Let me just show you what we're talking about. If I go all, so looking at the progression, this G7, this C7, possibly, like we said, some minor chords, this 4 minor down here, these are all going to kind of be replaced by other chords. Let's see what happens. Right, so that's exactly what's happened, right? So this G7 was replaced by borrowing from minor with G7 flat 9. And this C7 over here was replaced by, yet again, borrowing from minor and giving us C7 flat 9. So this has introduced more color to the chord, also some more tension that will resolve when you go to the next chord. And you'll notice down here, the 4 minor has become the flat 7, also borrowing from minor. All right, so next up we have melodic line cliches. What this will do is take any static chord of 2 or more measures, be it major or minor, and what it's going to do is reharmonize those measures to create a melodic line within the voicings. Usually by way of whole steps and half steps. So you might hear this, or you might hear something like that. Now looking at our arrangement, the most obvious place for this is the first 4 measures up here where you see that C major 7, and then down here where we have the D minor 7. It might also occur here on this C major 7 because it's 2 measures. But let's just click on all and see what kind of line cliches pop up. So there we go, right at the top. And there's that stepwise line right there. And then once again down here on the D minor major 7. So that line is now, that what was a static sort of nothing going on moment in the piece now has some really cool movement in it and has those lines built into the voicing. So you've kind of created a melody by way of the harmony, which is really neat. So right underneath melodic line cliches on the reharmonization panel is bass line cliches, which is essentially the same thing, only it's only going to apply it to minor chords. And it's the line we had earlier, but now only on the bass. All right, so if we click that, let's go back to the original. So looking at the chart, the only real place that meets those prerequisites that I spoke of a minor chord and 2 or more measures is right down here on this D minor 7. So that's where I anticipate seeing the bass line cliche. Let's see if that's what happens. Reharmonize, boom. So there also occurred up there on the top 2 measures where we had 2 measures, because remember we said it's minor chord and 2 or more measures, so it also did it there. And there's that bass line we just spoke of. Do, da, do. All right, and then again down here. Perfect. All right, last but certainly not least are dominance variations. What this will do is find any 5 chord of any function, primary or not, in any key, major or minor, and it will take that 5 chord, that so long as it's 1 measure or more. Once again, this is a means of like introducing some movement and tension and color into something that was otherwise static, and it'll start borrowing from other modes of that 5 chord. Let me show you what I'm talking about. So right off the bat, there's a 5 chord here. That's going to get changed. This C7 over here, this G7 over here, this A7 flat 9, these all meet the prerequisites that I was talking about of them being 5 chords and being at least a measure or more. So we click on dominant variations, go to all, and boom, there we have what was just a simple G7 chord. Now it's a G7 sus4, G7 sharp 9, that then resolves to the C major 7. And then again over here, what was just C7, C7 sus4, C7 sharp 9, a lot of tension. There we go, resolution. And you can see the chord scales underneath completely changed. Hexatonic, major blues, another hexatonic scale, another major blues mode there. And then again down here, what was just 2 measures of a G7 now has become, there we go, major blues, hexatonic, half diminished, mixo flat 9, all of those chords being built from those modes using the G7 as a sort of launching point to do all of that. So there you have it. Those are the different techniques that we've included into Mapping Tonal Harmony Pro to automatically reharmonize your music, your chart, or something else, someone else, maybe another standard that you want a different take or spin on. So just one quick thing about how to use the reharm panel. One thing you don't want to do is probably just like click all on everything. It's probably best to do either what I did earlier and just kind of randomly, a little bit of this, some of that, or if you like one of these techniques, prioritize that over the others. It's completely up to you. Just avoid doing all on everything. It's really cool to just mess around with and randomize like which ones you want to do or don't do. A little bit of this, a lot of that. Have fun with it. Do your own thing. Also, don't forget, you can always reharmonize a reharmonization. If I click reharmonize now with the random settings I've selected, I'll get an iteration of our chart, and if I click it again, I'll get a different. It's going to keep randomly reharmonizing reharmonizations if you're so inclined to do so. So that's another cool feature about the reharmonizing panel that you can also play around with and have fun. So that's it for today. Hopefully that was useful. Don't forget to check out our previous videos on reharmonization if any of these topics were a little bit cloudy or unclear to you. As always, keep checking back in for more content, music related. Thanks for watching.